They forced the woman to serve coffee, a task beneath no one yet assigned to her with a clear intent of insult. She was an anomaly, a name on a transfer manifest with no clear role, and that made her a problem. But the real problem, the one they couldn't see, was that soon an admiral would arrive, and he would freeze when he saw her. The gray dust of the Karen Badlands coated everything at Forward Operating Base Kestrel, a fine, gritty film that worked its way into gears, lungs, and morale. Master Specialist Anya Voronova felt it settle on her shoulders as she stood before the command tent, her transfer orders a flimsy shield against the colonel's palpable disdain. She was a ghost in the system, reassigned here after years in a sector that was now just a collection of redacted files. She had no unit, no official billet, just a single-line item. Specialist Voronova, A. Assigned FOB Kestrel. A weight tasking the ambiguity was a weapon used against her. Colonel Madsen did not like ambiguities. He was a man carved from regulation, his face a testament to a life spent in sterile command centers, far from the grit under Anya's fingernails. He looked at her not as a soldier, but as a clerical error. He held her file between his thumb and forefinger as if it were contaminated. "Voronova," he said, his voice flat, devoid of warmth or welcome. "Your record is a mess. Half of it is blacked out. The other half is sparse. Logistics and field support. What does that even mean?" Anya's gaze remained fixed on the spot just behind his head, a habit learned in places where direct eye contact was a challenge. "It means I support the field, sir." Her voice was low, steady, a voice that gave away nothing. Madsen's lip curled. It was a failure of the bureaucracy that she was here. An unassigned asset was a useless asset. "Well, we have plenty of support here. What we don't have is a decent cup of coffee." He gestured dismissively toward a small, stained counter inside the command tent, where a cheap electric kettle sat next to a tin of instant granules. "The command staff has a briefing in 10. Make yourself useful. Black, 2 sugars for Major Thorne." Just black for me. It was a test. A deliberate humiliation. He was putting her in a box, labeling her service staff, until he could figure out how to ship her back to whatever quiet corner of the service she'd crawled out of. Anya felt a familiar, cold stillness settle over her. She had been underestimated before. It was an old, comfortable cloak. She gave a single, sharp nod. "Yes, sir." She turned without another word, her movements economical, precise. She didn't look at the junior officers in the tent who quickly averted their eyes, some with pity, others with a faint smirk. She ignored them all. Her world narrowed to the task at hand, whether that task was calibrating a long-range sensor array or scooping bitter brown powder into ceramic mugs. The discipline was the same. As she filled the kettle, her eyes were not on the water level. They were scanning the tent, absorbing the layout. The tactical display flickered on the main screen, showing their sector of operations. She noted the patrol routes, the placement of the perimeter sensors. She saw the gaps. Her fingers were steady as she poured the boiling water. The steam rose, carrying the cheap, acrid smell of the coffee. But in her mind, she was tracing the lines of ingress and egress around the base, identifying the blind spots in the automated defense grid, noting the predictable patterns of the guard rotations. She saw 3 distinct vulnerabilities without even trying. The clink of the mug she placed on Colonel Madsen's desk was the only sound she made. He didn't look up. He simply grunted, his attention fixed on his datapad. Anya retreated to a corner of the tent, standing at ease, becoming part of the canvas walls. She was a shadow. She was a problem he had already solved. But Anya knew, with the certainty of a predator, that this place had problems far greater than her ambiguous paperwork. And when they surfaced, they wouldn't be solved with a cup of coffee. She would wait. She was very, very good at waiting. The dismissal was sharper than she had anticipated. Colonel Madsen hadn't just assigned her a menial task. He had defined her by it. In the hours that followed the initial briefing, he seemed to have forgotten her existence entirely, leaving her to linger in the oppressive heat of the command tent. But she wasn't lingering. She was observing. He saw a woman standing in a corner. She saw a system on the verge of collapse. Madsen's voice was a low drone, a constant current of clipped orders and impatient questions directed at his staff. Where is that supply convoy? I want an update every 15 minutes. Why is Sector Gamma's drone feed intermittent? Fix it. He managed his base like a man trying to plug a dozen holes in a dam with only his fingers, his stress radiating outwards, making his subordinates tense and inefficient. Anya watched Major Thorne, the executive officer, a man whose face was a mask of perpetual fatigue. He responded to Madsen's barking with tired sighs and promises he struggled to keep. The comms officer, a young lieutenant named Kale, had a nervous tic, his fingers drumming incessantly on his console. He was out of his depth, overwhelmed by the system's complexities. Anya's presence was a silent judgment they were all too busy to notice. Madsen, finally acknowledging her again hours later, did so with the same weary irritation. He pointed a thumb toward the door. Specialist, go find the quartermaster. See if you can't get this tent a new air filtration unit. This dust is going to ruin the servers. He didn't look at her when he spoke. The order was a make-work project, another way to get the clerical error out of his sight. Yes, Sir. Anya walked out of the tent into the blinding afternoon sun. The air was thick with heat and the smell of diesel. Instead of heading directly to the supply depot, she began a slow, deliberate circuit of the base perimeter. Her official reason was to get her bearings. Her actual reason was to confirm the weaknesses she'd already mapped in her head. The base was a standard hexagonal layout, prefabricated hab blocks and command modules dropped into a hastily bulldozed patch of wasteland. The perimeter was marked by HESCO barriers and automated gun turrets, supplemented by roving patrols. It looked formidable to the untrained eye. Anya's eye was not untrained. She saw the southern turret, number 7, had a slight but significant sag in its mounting. The calibration would be off. Its field of fire would have a 7-meter gap at a distance of 200 meters. She saw the patrol route for the eastern sector was too predictable, a lazy figure eight that could be timed down to the second. The guards walked with their heads down, their shoulders slumped against the oppressive monotony. They were tired, complacent. She noticed the power conduits for the northern sensor array were exposed, running along the base of the perimeter wall. A single, well-placed explosive charge would blind a third of the base. It was sloppy, dangerously sloppy. A young corporal, his face barely old enough to shave, watched her from his post. He saw her pause and look out into the empty desert, her head cocked as if listening to something. He saw her crouch down near the base of the wall, touching the thick power cable. He frowned, his curiosity piqued. He was used to new arrivals looking lost or intimidated. This woman looked like she was reading a book. When she finally reached the quartermaster's depot, a cavernous, stiflingly hot structure of corrugated metal, she found the man in charge buried under a mountain of requisitions. He barely glanced at her. Air filter? Get in line. Whole base needs something. Got a convoy overdue. Probably hit by the same sandstorm that took out half our long-range comms last week. His words confirmed another of Anya's silent observations. The base was isolated. They were running on dwindling supplies and patchy communication, pretending it was business as usual. She did not argue or press the issue. She simply took a standard requisition form, filled it out with neat, block letters and left it on his desk. The filter wasn't the point. The information was. Returning to the command tent, she resumed her position in the corner. Madsen was now berating Lieutenant Kale over a static-laced channel. Unacceptable, Lieutenant. Tell Sector Command we need a priority tech dispatch. I want that array fully operational by nightfall. Anya listened to the static. It wasn't the random hiss of atmospheric interference. There was a pattern to it. A faint, looping cadence buried beneath the noise. It wasn't a malfunction. It was a signal. A very sophisticated, very hostile one, designed to mimic equipment failure. She looked at the faces of the men in the room, at their stress and their frustration. They were fighting their own equipment, blind to the real enemy who was patiently and expertly turning their own technology against them. The pressure was building. They just didn't know it yet. Anya did. And as she watched them flail, she felt the old, cold calm settle deeper. Soon, their world of neat regulations and clear-cut problems would shatter. And in the chaos, she would finally be useful. Her methodical observation was a silent, gathering storm. While the command staff treated the base's mounting issues as a series of disconnected irritants, Anya saw them as a coordinated symphony of impending disaster. She spent the next day in a state of active stillness, moving through the base on trivial errands assigned by Madsen, each one a thread she pulled to unravel the larger tapestry of their vulnerability. She cataloged everything. The intermittent power flickers weren't random surges. They occurred in a sequence, a prime number pattern that suggested an external system was probing their power grid, searching for the precise frequency to cause a cascading failure. The missing supply convoy wasn't just delayed. Its last known coordinates placed it in a narrow canyon known for being an ideal ambush point, a fact no one had cross-referenced with recent enemy patrol data. She saw the patterns because her mind was trained to look for them. Years spent in deep field operations, where a single overlooked detail could mean the death of an entire team, had stripped away the clutter of assumption and hope. She saw only data, and the data was screaming. The pressure finally began to manifest in a way even Madsen couldn't ignore late that afternoon. The static that had been plaguing their long-range comms suddenly intensified, bleeding over into the local tactical network. The drone feeds from the perimeter dissolved into a waterfall of digital noise. The screens in the command tent, once clear windows into their surroundings, became useless canvases of shimmering, chaotic pixels. Panic, a low-grade but persistent hum, began to rise in the tent. "What is this?" Madsen roared, slamming his hand on a console. "Kale, get it back. Get it back now." Lieutenant Kale's face was pale, slick with sweat. He typed furiously, his commands doing nothing to stem the tide of interference. "I can't, sir. It's not responding. It's like the entire system is being drowned. The source is everywhere. It's a wide-spectrum jamming signal, more powerful than anything I've ever seen. Find a way around it?" Madsen snapped, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Reroute through the backup satellite. Hardline the perimeter sensors. Do something." While the tech team scrambled, their movements becoming increasingly frantic and ineffective, Anya remained in her corner. She was not watching the screens. She was watching the people. She saw the way Major Thorne's hand trembled as he reached for his sidearm, a purely reflexive gesture of helplessness. She saw the fear in Kale's eyes as he realized he was utterly defeated. She saw Madsen's authority beginning to crack, his bluster a thin veneer over a core of gnawing uncertainty. He was a man who commanded systems, and his systems were betraying him. Anya stepped forward. It was not a dramatic stride, just 2 quiet steps that brought her out of the shadows. The movement was so unexpected that for a moment, no one noticed. "Sir," she said, her voice cutting through the rising tide of panic like a razor. It wasn't loud, but it had a quality of absolute stillness that commanded attention. Madsen turned, his face a thunderous mask of irritation. "What is it, Specialist?" "I'm busy, in case you hadn't noticed." He was ready to dismiss her, to send her for more coffee, to get her out of his sight. Anya ignored his tone. Her gaze was fixed on the main console, where Lieutenant Kale was still trying fruitlessly to reboot the primary server. "The jamming signal isn't brute force," she stated, not as a suggestion, but as a fact. "It's adaptive. It's mirroring our system's handshake protocols and flooding them with recursive ghost signals. You're trying to fight it on the software level. The attack is on the hardware." Kale looked up, his expression a mixture of confusion and insult. "Who are you? What do you know about signal intelligence?" Madsen's eyes narrowed. "Explain yourself." Specialist. Anya walked calmly to a secondary engineering console that had been relegated to diagnostics. The techs ignored it, focusing on the primary systems. She ran her fingers over the keys, her touch light and sure. "Our system is designed to shunt power away from a damaged component to prevent a full system short. The enemy knows this. They're not trying to break the door down. They're tricking the system into locking itself." She typed a rapid series of commands, bringing up a raw energy schematic of the comms array. A pulsing red node confirmed her theory. "There. They've found a resonance frequency in the primary power converter. They're using it to make the system think it's failing, so it defensively shuts itself down. The crisis was escalating, the electronic blindness making every soldier on the base feel like a target in the dark. The others were panicking. Anya was calm. She was finally in her element. The noise, the chaos, the fear, it was all just data, and she knew exactly how to use it. The intervention was swift and silent. While Madsen and Kale were still processing her words, trying to fit her calm analysis into their frantic paradigm, Anya acted. She didn't wait for permission. In her experience, waiting for permission from panicked men was a fatal mistake. She moved from the diagnostic console to the main server rack at the back of the tent. It was a dense monolith of humming machinery and blinking lights, its access panel secured with a standard biometric lock. "That's restricted access," Kale stammered, finding his voice. "You can't." Anya paid him no mind. Her fingers found a small, almost invisible seam at the edge of the panel. She pressed a precise sequence of pressure points along the frame. There was a soft click, and the panel swung open, bypassing the lock entirely. The tech stared, mouths agape. It was a maintenance override known only to the highest-level systems engineers. Madsen took a half-step forward, his mouth opening to shout, but the sheer, baffling competence of her actions held him in check. Inside the server rack was a tangled nest of fiber optic cables and power conduits. To the others, it was an incomprehensible mess. To Anya, it was a circuit diagram she could read as easily as a map. Her hands moved with an unnerving, fluid certainty, a surgeon's precision. She didn't need tools. She rerouted a secondary power line, pulling it from the environmental control system. The tent's air conditioning unit died with a wheeze, and the temperature instantly began to climb, but Anya didn't even seem to notice. She located the main frequency modulator, a small crystal component buried deep within the chassis. "The enemy signal is piggybacking on our carrier wave," she explained, her voice even, almost conversational, as her fingers worked. "We can't block it because to do so we'd have to block our own comms. So we changed the wave." She took a small copper coil from a defunct data port and, with a twist of her wrist, wedged it against the modulator crystal. It was a crude, improper modification, something that would make a certified technician scream. "By creating a harmonic imbalance, we can force a frequency shift," she continued, her focus absolute. "It will create a new carrier wave on a restricted subband that their jamming array isn't programmed to detect. It will only last for a few minutes before their system adapts, but it will be long enough." She slammed the panel shut. A bead of sweat trickled down Lieutenant Kale's temple in the now stifling heat. For a moment, nothing happened. The screens remained a wash of static. Madsen's face hardened, a triumphant, "I told you so," forming on his lips. Then, with a sudden flicker, one of the drone feeds came back online. It was grainy, distorted, but it was there. A second later, another screen cleared. Then another. Within 10 seconds, every screen in the command tent was active, displaying crisp, clear images of the perimeter. The tactical network map reappeared, blinking with friendly unit positions. A calm, automated voice filled the tent. "System online. Tactical network reestablished." A collective, disbelieving sigh of relief went through the room. Lieutenant Kale stared at his console, then at Anya, then back at his console. How did you do that?" "That's not in any manual." Anya had already stepped back into her corner, her posture once again relaxed at ease. "They will adapt," she said simply. "The signal's algorithm is learning. You have a window of approximately 12 minutes to send a compressed data packet to Sector Command detailing the nature of the attack. Then you must take the system offline manually, or they will use the new frequency to deliver a worm." She didn't boast. She didn't wait for thanks. She just stated the facts and retreated into the background, as if she had done nothing more remarkable than brewing a pot of coffee. The silence in the tent was absolute, broken only by the hum of the restored servers. Madsen stared at her, his face a complex mask of shock, suspicion, and a dawning, uncomfortable sense of awe. He had dismissed this woman as a piece of administrative clutter. He had made her serve coffee, and she had just single-handedly saved his base from a sophisticated electronic assault that had completely defeated his entire technical staff. The problem of Specialist Voronova had just become a much, much bigger question. The shift in the command tent was as palpable as a change in barometric pressure. The air, once thick with Madsen's abrasive authority, was now filled with a tense, uncertain silence. Anya Voronova was no longer an invisible fixture in the corner. She was a gravitational anomaly, warping the space around her. People didn't look through her anymore. They looked at her, their glances quick and furtive, as if she might suddenly do something else incomprehensible. Colonel Madsen, for his part, was profoundly unsettled. His worldview was built on hierarchy, on clear roles and documented qualifications. Anya's file said logistics and field support. It did not say miracle worker in advanced electronic warfare. He spent the next hour pacing his small office, pulling up her file again and again, staring at the blacked-out sections as if he could burn through the redactions with sheer willpower. He ordered Lieutenant Kale to run a full diagnostic on her system modifications. Kale's report only deepened the mystery. "Sir, I don't understand it. The way she rerouted the power and modified the modulator. It's a brilliant, completely unorthodox solution. It's not just outside the box, sir. It's a different shape entirely. We're holding the connection just like she said we would. We've sent the data packet," Madsen grunted, dismissing the young officer. His problem wasn't just that she had been right. It was the way she had been right. There was no triumph in her. No hint of "I told you so." Her actions had been as impersonal and efficient as a firing pin striking a primer. It was the detached competence of a true professional, and it made the colonel's own blustering feel hollow and amateurish. Curiosity began to grow among the lower ranks as well. The story of the mysterious specialist who had fixed the unfixable comm system spread through the base like wildfire. The corporal who had seen her examining the perimeter wall now recounted the incident with a new sense of significance. The supply sergeant remembered the calm, observant way she had filled out a simple requisition. They were small, disconnected pieces, but now they were beginning to form a mosaic, and the image taking shape was of someone far more significant than her rank or posting suggested. Madsen, swallowing his pride, knew he could no longer ignore her. The jamming had been a prelude, a way of isolating the base before a physical attack. He was now certain of it. And this woman, this ghost, was the only person who had understood the nature of the threat. He found her not in the command tent, but in the motor pool, where she was watching a team of mechanics struggle with the engine of a light armored vehicle. She wasn't offering advice, just observing, her head tilted slightly. "Specialist?" Madsen said. His tone now clipped and formal, devoid of its earlier condescension. Anya turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Sir, the comms are holding for now. Your intervention was successful." He said the word intervention, as if it were a foreign object in his mouth. "I need to know what you are. That file is useless. I am Master Specialist Voronova, sir." "As the file states," she replied, her voice perfectly neutral. The answer was both entirely truthful and a complete evasion. It infuriated him, but he suppressed his anger. He needed her. "The enemy that did this," he pressed, gesturing back toward the comms array. "They aren't insurgents with rusty rifles. This was sophisticated, coordinated. What do you assess is their next move?" He was asking for her opinion. It was a monumental concession. Anya's gaze shifted from his face to the horizon, to the jagged, sun-scorched mountains that bordered their sector. Her eyes, which had seemed so placid, now held a chilling sharpness. "The jamming was a preparatory action. They isolated you to shape the battlefield. They created a blind spot, and now they will exploit it." She turned her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as she looked toward the southern perimeter. "They'll use the blind spot in Turret 7's coverage. They'll time their approach to coincide with the Eastern Patrol's weakest point. And they'll hit the exposed power conduit on the northern array first, creating a cascade failure that will draw your response teams to the wrong location. The main assault will come from the south, while you're distracted." She laid it out so plainly, so devoid of doubt, that it sounded less like a prediction and more like a weather report. Madsen stared at her, a cold dread creeping up his spine. Every weakness she had just named was a detail he and his staff had overlooked for months. She had been on his base for less than 2 days. The woman he had ordered to serve coffee now held the survival of his entire command in her hands. The atmosphere crackled. This was no longer about a mysterious specialist. It was a second, far more dangerous test. Madsen's mind raced. Everything she said resonated with a terrifying logic. It was a classic feint and strike, but tailored perfectly to the specific vulnerabilities of his base. Vulnerabilities she had no business knowing in such detail. He had a choice. Trust the rigid structure he had always known, or trust this enigmatic woman who operated so far outside of it. For a man like Madsen, it was no choice at all. He had to know if she was right. "Major Thorne," he barked into his wrist comm, his voice tight. "Redirect Drone 4 to the southern perimeter. Grid reference 7-9, Delta. I want a full thermal and acoustic scan of the approach ravine. And get me a fire team, armed and ready, at the northern conduit access point." Now he was testing her theory. It was a hedge, a way to verify her claims without fully committing his forces. Anya watched him, her expression unchanging. She knew what he was doing. She also knew it was already too late. The enemy wasn't coming. They were already there. As if on cue, a new alert chimed through the base's comm network, a high-pitched, urgent tone. "Sir." It was the voice of the corporal from the eastern watchtower. "I have movement. Multiple contacts. Eastern sector. Moving fast." Madsen's head snapped toward the command tent. "It's a feint, sir," Anya said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, a chillingly calm sound against the rising alarm. The real attack is not there at that exact moment. A low, guttural explosion rocked the northern end of the base. The lights in the motor pool flickered and died, and the emergency power kicked in with a groan, casting everything in a blood-red glow. On Madsen's comm, the fire team leader at the northern conduit shouted, "Contact! We're taking fire. The conduit is hit. I repeat, the northern array is down." Madsen was frozen for a heartbeat, caught between the two threats. His instincts screamed to reinforce the north, where his men were under fire. But Anya's cold, certain words echoed in his mind. The real attack is not there. All forces. He began to shout into his comm, ready to send his reserves north. "Sir," Anya interrupted, her voice sharp, cutting through his command. She pointed not north, not east, but south, toward the silent, seemingly secure perimeter. Turret 7 before Madsen could even process her words. The drone feed from the southern sector, which had just been redirected, flashed onto his datapad. The image was grainy, but the message was horrifyingly clear. A team of 6 figures, clad in black, moved with inhuman speed and precision through the exact 7-meter gap in the turret's coverage that Anya had identified. They were already inside the wire. They had used the northern explosion as their dinner bell. The base's entire command structure was focused on the wrong threat, just as she had predicted. There was no time for orders, no time for debate. Anya was already moving. She snatched a service rifle from the hands of a stunned mechanic who was fumbling with the safety. Her movements were a blur of efficiency. She checked the chamber, slapped the magazine home, and racked the slide in a single fluid motion that spoke of 1,000 hours of practice. She didn't run. She flowed, moving from cover to cover with a predator's grace. Her profile low, her weapon always ready. Madsen and the handful of soldiers in the motor pool could only watch, paralyzed by the speed of the unfolding disaster. Seal the command tent. Internal security teams converge on the southern habblocks. Madsen roared into his comm, finally finding his voice. But he knew it was too little, too late. The enemy was inside, and they were heading for the heart of the base. Anya moved with a purpose that was terrifying to behold. She wasn't just reacting. She was hunting. She seemed to know the enemy's path before they took it. She cut through a narrow maintenance corridor, emerging behind the primary barracks, intercepting the infiltration team as they prepared to assault the command module. The firefight was brutally short. The motor pool soldiers saw only muzzle flashes and heard the disciplined, controlled bursts of Anya's rifle, starkly different from the frantic, spraying fire of the enemy. She didn't waste a single round. Every shot was a kill. She moved between positions with a liquid speed that made her an impossible target, using the base's architecture to her advantage, turning the environment into a weapon. In less than 30 seconds, it was over. Silence descended, broken only by the crackle of fires from the northern conduit and the distant shouting of the misdirected response teams. Anya emerged from the shadows between the buildings. She wasn't even breathing heavily. She walked back toward the motor pool, the rifle held loosely at her side. She stopped before the stunned colonel. She placed the rifle on a nearby crate, its barrel still smoking. She had neutralized a 6-man elite infiltration team alone. She had done it without orders, without support, and with a level of tactical brilliance that Madsen had only ever read about in classified after-action reports of legendary operations. The second test had been passed. The whispers about her would now become legends. An hour later, the base was secure. The eastern attack had been a small diversionary force easily repelled. The northern fire had been contained. The bodies of the 6 elite infiltrators from the south were being examined by a grim-faced intelligence officer. Each had been taken down with a single, precise shot. Colonel Madsen stood in the command tent, which was now running on emergency power. The mood was somber, the earlier panic replaced by a heavy, stunned silence. He was rereading the report on the infiltrators when the proximity alarm announced the arrival of an unscheduled transport. A sleek, high-altitude shuttle, black as midnight, descended toward the landing pad. It bore the insignia of Fleet Command. Major Thorne looked at Madsen. "Sir? We weren't expecting any VIPs." Madsen's gut tightened. He knew, somehow, that this arrival was connected to the woman who was currently standing quietly by the comm station, monitoring the slow process of rebooting the system. The shuttle's ramp lowered, and a single figure emerged, flanked by 2 Marine guards in gleaming dress uniforms. He was tall, lean, with silver hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He wore the uniform of a fleet admiral, his chest a constellation of service ribbons. Madsen and Thorne snapped to attention, their minds reeling. It was Admiral Thorne, not a relation. It was Admiral Marcus Thorne, the legendary commander of the entire 7th Fleet, a man who usually only appeared on holobriefings from the sector capital. Madsen rushed out to meet him, his mind racing to find a plausible explanation for the state of his base. "Admiral Thorne, this is an unexpected honor, sir. I apologize for the situation. We just repelled a coordinated enemy attack." The Admiral's eyes, a piercing shade of blue, swept over the smoke-stained buildings and the scurrying damage control teams. He didn't seem surprised. His gaze was cold, analytical. "I'm not here about the attack, Colonel. I'm here for an asset." He strode past Madsen, his boots crunching on the dusty ground, heading directly for the command tent. Madsen and his staff followed in his wake, a collection of nervous, confused officers. The Admiral entered the tent, his eyes immediately scanning the room. He took in the damaged consoles, the weary faces of the tech staff, and then his gaze fell on Anya. She was standing by the server rack, her back to him, methodically checking a power conduit. "Specialist Voronova," Madsen said, his voice strained. Attention. Anya turned slowly. She saw the Admiral, and for the first time since she had arrived, a flicker of something crossed her face. Not surprise, but a deep, weary recognition. She straightened, her posture shifting from that of a specialist to something else, something older and far more dangerous. She simply stood there, waiting. The Admiral stopped dead. His famously stoic expression dissolved. His eyes widened, and a look of profound, utter disbelief washed over his features. The 2 Marine guards behind him shifted uncomfortably, having never seen their commander display such raw emotion. The air in the tent became so thick it was hard to breathe. Madsen watched, completely baffled, as the formidable Admiral stared at the quiet, unassuming woman he had tasked with making coffee. Admiral Thorne took one slow step forward. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a choked whisper, a sound of reverence and shock that silenced the entire room. He didn't address her by her rank. He used a single word, a name that echoed with the weight of shadow wars and impossible missions. Nyx. The name hung in the air, electric and heavy with meaning. It was a call sign, a ghost story whispered by intelligence analysts and special forces veterans. Nyx, the Night Walker, the operative sent to handle situations that officially never happened. To the men in the room, it meant nothing. To Admiral Thorne, it meant everything. He looked from Anya's calm, waiting face to the bewildered Colonel Madsen. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place for him with an audible, sickening clang. He saw the state of the base, the evidence of a sophisticated attack barely thwarted, and he saw the woman who High Command had sent as a silent, unannounced insurance policy. His disbelief curdled into a cold, quiet fury. "Colonel," the Admiral said, his voice now dangerously low, each word a chip of ice. "What precisely has been this operative's primary duty since arriving at your command?" Madsen swallowed. The Admiral's gaze was pinning him to the spot. He couldn't lie. The truth was too absurd, too damning. "Sir, she was unassigned. I had her assisting with administrative duties in the command tent." The Admiral's eyes narrowed until they were mere slits of blue fire. "Administrative duties?" He took a step closer to Madsen, his voice dropping even further, a venomous whisper meant only for him. "Colonel, do you have any idea who this is? 10 years ago, the entire Eastern Grid was being puppeted by a rogue AI known as Sharon. It had infiltrated our entire command and control network. We were days away from a system-wide collapse that would have cost us the war. We sent in a team of our best. A 12-person team from Task Force Omega. They were all wiped out. Except 1 inch, he pointed a trembling finger at Anya. She went dark. For 72 hours, there was silence. Then, one by one, Karen's nodes began to go offline. She hunted it down and killed it from the inside out, alone with no support. We pulled her out of the wreckage of its primary server core, half dead and covered in burns. Her call sign was Nyx. The revelation fell like a physical blow. The command tent was utterly silent, save for the hum of the emergency power. Lieutenant Kale looked as though he was going to faint. Major Thorne's mouth was hanging open. Colonel Madsen felt the blood drain from his face. He looked at Anya, at the quiet woman with the steady hands who had fixed his comms array with a piece of scavenged wire. The woman who had single-handedly eliminated an enemy kill team. The woman he had told to make him coffee with 2 sugars. The Admiral wasn't finished. His voice rose, filled with a righteous, scathing anger. "This woman is a living legend. The only reason her file is blacked out is that most of the operations she was on are still too classified to admit they ever happened. She isn't here because of a clerical error, Colonel. She is here because someone at the very top of Fleet Command near your sector was about to break, and they sent the one person they believed could hold the line. And you had her serving coffee." He turned his back on the humiliated Colonel and faced Anya. The anger vanished from his expression, replaced by a profound, almost paternal respect. "Nyx," he said, his voice softening. "Anya, your file came across my desk. A request for a quiet, out-of-the-way posting. I should have known you wouldn't find 1 inch." Anya gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "Trouble finds me, sir. Or I find it. So I see," the Admiral said. He then did something that no one in the room had ever seen an officer of his rank do. He drew himself up to his full height and rendered a slow, perfect salute. It wasn't a salute to a master specialist. It was a salute to a warrior, an equal, a legend. The 2 Marine guards, their faces impassive but their eyes wide with shock, immediately followed his lead, their salutes snapping into place. For a long moment, the 3 of them stood there, honoring the unassuming woman in the dusty fatigues. Then, one by one, the other soldiers in the tent, from Major Thorne down to the youngest tech, began to raise their hands to their brows. They were saluting not out of regulation, but out of a raw, newfound, and deeply humbled respect. Colonel Madsen was the last. His arm felt like it was made of lead. He raised it slowly, his eyes fixed on Anya's face. His salute was a silent, desperate apology, an admission of his own blindness. Anya did not salute back. She wasn't in their chain of command. She wasn't one of them. She was something else. She simply stood there, her gaze steady, and gave a single brief nod. It was an acceptance, an acknowledgement, and in the silent, heavy air of the command tent, it was more than enough. The following dawn broke clear and cold. The night had been spent in a flurry of activity, directed not by Colonel Madsen, but by the quiet, confident presence of Admiral Thorne. The base's defenses were being overhauled with a desperate urgency, following a detailed list of vulnerabilities provided by Anya. Madsen was a ghost in his own command center, his authority stripped away not by a formal reprimand, but by the silent, collective judgment of his own staff. He moved through the motions, but the real nexus of power was now wherever the Admiral and Anya stood together, their heads bent over a tactical map. Admiral Thorne had offered her a full commission on the spot, a field promotion to captain, a staff position on his flagship, anything she wanted. She had politely but firmly refused. "I'm not a commander, sir," she had said. "I'm a tool. You point me at a problem and I solve it. Ranks just get in the way." The Admiral, who understood her better than anyone, had simply nodded and withdrawn the offer. He knew that what she valued wasn't status, but purpose and respect, and she had finally earned that here. Anya stood on the perimeter wall, near the now repaired and recalibrated Turret 7. The sun was just cresting the jagged peaks of the distant mountains, painting the Badlands in hues of orange and purple. The air was crisp, washed clean by the cool desert night. In her hands, she held a steaming thermal mug. The coffee inside was rich and dark, a quality blend from the Admiral's personal shuttle stores. She hadn't made it. She had found it sitting on her bunk when she had returned for a few hours of rest, a silent offering from an unknown source. She took a slow sip, the warmth spreading through her. She watched the patrols moving with a new alertness, their routes now randomized, their posture sharp. She saw maintenance crews swarming the northern wall, encasing the once-exposed power conduits in reinforced plasteel. The base was waking up, hardening itself, learning from its near-fatal mistakes. A figure approached her along the wall. It was the young corporal who had been on watch in the eastern tower. He was carrying a fresh, steaming mug. He stopped a few feet away from her, his nervousness obvious. He looked at her not with fear, but with a kind of breathless awe. "Ma'am," he said, his voice cracking slightly. I just wanted to say, thank you. We would have been slaughtered." Anya turned her head to look at him. Her eyes, which could be so cold and analytical, held a flicker of warmth. "You saw the feint. You made the call. You did your job, Corporal." The praise, simple and direct, made the young soldier stand a little taller. He held out the mug he was carrying. "I thought you might like a fresh one. The generator in the mess hall is back online." She looked down at the mug already in her hands, then back at his earnest face. She gave him a small, genuine smile. It transformed her face, softening the hard lines for just a moment. She reached out and took the fresh mug from him. "Thank you, Corporal," he nodded, a wide grin spreading across his face, and then he retreated, walking away as if he'd just been given a medal. Anya turned back to the horizon. She now held 2 mugs, one in each hand. She took a sip from the new one. It was the cheap, bitter instant coffee from the command tent. She held the 2 mugs, one representing the respect of the powerful, the other the gratitude of the powerless. Both were earned. She stood there for a long time, a solitary figure against the vast, empty landscape. The sun rose higher, burning away the morning chill. She was no longer a clerical error, no longer an object of dismissal. She was Nyx. She was Master Specialist Anya Voronova. She was the quiet woman who drank her coffee and watched the walls, a silent guardian in a place that had, for a brief, foolish moment, forgotten that the most dangerous weapons are often the ones you fail to see. Her dignity, like the horizon before her, was vast, silent, and absolute.